Thank you. And it's always nice to walk up to a start with a round of applause. Thanks, Dan. Thank you all. Yeah, it is very fun. It's been fun working with Kim. I wouldn't mess with her either. And it's been good to do this. But it is good to mess around with Kim. And we did that a lot. So that's what this is going to be about. I'm just going to give you a little sort of scene setting as to what this is about and where it came from. So picture, if you will, in picturesque Yarra Glen in post-World War II, the power of community saw land was purchased and the construction of a maternal child health centre happened by the community with their money on their block of land. And that maternal child health centre served a small and growing community with its numerous returned soldiers who brought their new brides. And that's a term from the president of the Historical Society, it's not my terminology. But she said they brought their new wife back to Yarra Glen post-World War II. But over time, the powers that be increased regulations and standards, and they were required for such a premise. The power in the community to upkeep that facility waned, leading the community to gift the land and the building to council. As more time passed, council built a new facility. This one became, the one on the screen became surplus to requirement. Council chose to sell the building, and they decreed that the citizens of Yarra Glen should reap the benefits of the sale of the property. And this is where our story takes off. $1 million. 3,000 people.
A lot of money. So, Chad and Kim have been thinking about how to tell you the story, and you get to the point of every conference when you couldn't do one more presentation, yeah? So they're going to try some new ways of telling you the story. Is that okay? Come on down, Kim. So, Kim, imagine that here is the beginning of the story,
yep.
And down the end of this end of the line is, well, the end as we know it, end of the story. Yep. And I'm going to get you to tell the story in 5 steps, so just the 5 big steps. And Chad, feel free, when you get a step that sounds like you were there, jump on. And,
you know that's going to be hard, Anne, because I have just walked 1.5 million steps.
Ah, okay. Well, this will be less like the Camino, and that I can't promise a religious experience, but I can promise that we'll get somewhere near Simon. Is that good enough for us?
Not St James.
Oh, okay. You spent too long by yourself. Okay. So, if you were to think about the first sort of step out, what's as the beginning of this this sort of project? Take one step and tell us where you've landed. Where was the beginning of this project? So, where were you?
The beginning of this project, where was I? I'd only just come into this role.
You're brand new, fantastic.
About 2 years ago.
And so did you know about the $1 million at this point?
It hadn't actually sold it.
Yep.
At that point, we'd only just started engaging with the community about whether we should sell it.
Okay.
So that was, I was just sort of landing in that. And then what I found out through that process is that Yarra Glen community is a highly engaged community.
Yep.
And we have a lot of those in Yarra Ranges. For anyone who doesn't know about Yarra Ranges,
Don't sell real estate just
no.
yet. Okay, so it's a highly engaged.
Yeah. Come along with no.
Yeah.
So highly engaged community who are vociferous.
Yep.
They know what they want. They're ringing up every department in council to make sure that they get what they want. Council inadvertently over-engages with them and then inadvertently doesn't give them what they want, even though we try to give them what they want. Or when it happens, it's 10 years down the track and everyone's forgotten that that's really what they wanted.
I've seen people crying. I don't want it to be.
I know, but that's Yarra Glen and council's relationship.
Fantastic.
So it started with a bit of a negative relationship.
Right, so it started a bit negative and a bit of kerfuffle about what they're
Yeah.
going to do and will it be?
Yeah.
Okay. So from there,
Yeah.
what was your next step? What was the next major thing? Big step? Yep.
Timing was the next major thing.
Yep. You only got 5 steps.
I know. This is a big one, this one.
Okay.
So, property sold. I was doing training through the VLGA around deliberative engagement processes, and I just realised this is this process would be perfect for Yarra Glen. The reason why is because Yarra Glen is a small community. It's a very confined, deliberative process. Something that I had a feeling Yarra Ranges Council might buy into, because it is our first time, really, first timers in this space. And luckily for me, the ward councillor at the time was also doing other training by someone else, but in the deliberative space. And I had already spoken to my manager about this. He says, yeah, why not give it a go? At the same time, the councillor approached me. Hey, I've had this idea. And I said, great, because I've had the same idea.
Fantastic.
So
it all kind of came together.
Yeah.
Yeah, you a bit of training on the decision making side, and you thought, this feels like us, we might as well give it a bump.
Yeah. And I took a massive leap of faith in my own ability and that of other people around me. As I said, have never done this before, so I just thought, what the heck, why don't I just give it a go?
What the heck? So that's one of the key parts of the story, which is you think, what the heck? Yeah.
Well, actually, that's about right. You've just got to go with it and have some confidence and be prepared to make lots of mistakes. But the other part of this step is, I guess the main thing in getting the rest of the organisation to come on board was this whole concept of helping them to see that they're not really relinquishing power by giving power to the community.
Right.
And that was really quite, it wasn't too tricky, but there were some people who were not happy about it.
So while there was some people saying, well, why don't we give it a go, that sounds interesting, and it might be another way to deal with this kind of oh sorry, that's New Zealand, noise over here.
Yeah.
There were other people going,
Oh yeah.
Okay, so there was a bit of wooing going on.
Yeah, and that wooing was also happening in the community as well, because we had the community leaders who are the ones who are always telling council what the community wants, because they know what the community wants.
Oh, nice.
They had to get used to this whole concept of relinquishing their power.
Nice.
And so consequently, I ended up the meat and sandwich. But that's cool. Being vegetarian, I made sure it was faux meat, so that was okay. But
that's right. I'm good. So okay, so you've got this thing where you've got the key people saying yes. You've got other people in the background going, and the rumour's gone round that you're vegetarian and not worth having a go at.
Exactly.
And so what was the third step? What happened after that? What's the next big thing you did? Big lad. Oh my goodness, it's a big one. I'm short, don't go too far. Yep.
The third step was actually just bringing it all together. So I'll just sort of talk about how we went about the process of selecting our jury.
Was Chad here?
Chad is coming in very soon.
Okay, right, because I was worried that he'd just come to... Okay, so he just did the last bit. That's quite nice.
No, he'll be coming in
as
part of this step, actually.
Okay, right.
And I might actually inadvertently go back to step 2.
No, we're here now.
All right.
Never go back.
Okay. So, so I had permission to go ahead with this, and I was told there's no money. And I thought, yay, that's great. So I managed to find some money, but not much. So I started out...
I wonder Chad's late.
I know. I started out with I was told I had about $10,000 to do this. And we'd already done a lot of research, and we'd spoken to a lot of different people like New Democracy and Kimber and a bunch of other people about how much is this going to cost? Well, we've only got $10,000. Anyway, it ended up costing us about 15 or 16 by the time we included catering and all that. Like, we really did it tight. So, to be innovative in selecting our jury, and we had picked the brains of many people who very, very kindly just told us, gave us some ideas about what we can do. So we thought, we've got a lot of in-house expertise, particularly when it comes to our social planner, and she's wonderful. And I went to Kathy and I said, hey, I need to select 12 people for a citizens jury. She said, what's that? So I had to explain to her what it all was. And she came up with a way to randomly select people. we approached the Victorian Electoral Commission. Normally they said to us normally it would cost us $800 or something, I don't know, to have access to.
But you said you Yarra Range.
We said we have no money, and they said, all right, we'll just give it to you. So they did, but you didn't hear that. So we got that for free. They gave us the electoral roll for Yarra Glen. That all went into a spreadsheet, random selection. 800 people were invited to express an interest. Out of the 800, we had 47 people submit.
So here you had the challenger money, and what you did is, rather than going, oh no, we can't do it, you said, oh, how can we do it within our own resources?
Yeah.
You had smart people inside the council who did their smart things, and you had generous people in the network of other facilitators and practitioners who said, well, how about this, and you could do that. So lots of people giving you advice, and actually you had that good community kind of pitch and kind of, and that sort of, and so it started to go. Is Chad coming?
In a minute.
In a minute, okay.
Coming up.
Okay, just close.
He's
Right.
very close.
So you've started to do that selection,
Yes.
and so was there anything that started, what was the next step?
Oh, there's still something in this step.
What was the last thing in this step?
The last thing in this step was then getting our facilitator.
Ah,
And
this is the Chad moment.
This is a Chad moment,
Yes.
and this is, before Chad comes in, this is really important because we already had an advisory committee that we pulled together, made of community leaders.
Yep.
And they assisted us with the selection process through the procurement. So, you know, all councils have their procurement process. We actually gave them permission to participate in that, and they actually helped select the facilitator.
So what was the key things for you in finding the right person?
Experience, able to do it on a really, really tight budget.
Experience, cheap. I know, I can see you struggling.
Experience, cheap, and someone that we felt could build rapport really quickly with the
Felt like
community.
connected to you, yeah?
Yeah, and with the community, because
And the
we knew that
community.
Yarra Glen, what they were like.
Yep.
Probably the main, and then, well, of course, we have all of our procurement criteria, you know, value for money, best value, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, okay. That's
So we actually had a member of a community member on our selection panel.
Right. And you get a few people who were interested?
Yes, we did.
Great. And about now, you chose Chad?
Yeah, we brought Chad in,
Right,
and that's where the fun started.
Fantastic. So come on down, Chad.
I was in step 2 as well with the training with the Victorian
Oh, okay, so you've got this.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Okay.
So I was there.
So you sort of knew about it, you know?
A little about it, and the training was, we had a session and there was intervening sessions where we were speaking to participants about what they were doing, so they was kind of coaching, and then they would come back for a second day, and the idea was that they would be working on a real life project.
Right. So you
Some
were,
progressed, some didn't.
so that built some rapport,
Yeah.
and they sort of knew you,
Yep.
and then you're stepping forward and they chose you. So what was the next thing? So
The
was
next
what was being chosen like?
Nice, was good. Yes, quite happy. Budget, that was the budget. But
So what, you know, you're a good businessman. What did you say yes when really the money wasn't in it?
so for me, this was an opportunity to put something out to the sector to say it's possible to do a deliberative process on a smaller scale. It doesn't have to be a whole municipality, and it doesn't have to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
So it sort of was stitched into the lining of you. It was part of what's important to you. Okay, good skills. Okay. What's the next step?
There was one more here before we go. Sorry, I know
Yes,
we-
yes.
I know
No,
we're
it's
ready to
okay.
go.
That's fine. You've got time.
In terms of keeping the cost down, one of the things that Kim did, which I thought worked quite well, because there's issues of transparency and power. So if someone from the outside is saying, well, you just selected people you knew on the jury.
Right.
So they had the social planner, who's, you know, did the random stratified sample, but then they gave the list to a group of 4 or 5 councils who came together. So the
I
council
have
didn't-
been away for too long, haven't I?
Council,
It's all that walking. It
That's
does
the most
you.
important part.
It was.
so council didn't know who the people were, and they gave it to a group of councils who, you know, have jobs like Kim, and they got together and they said, here's group A and here's group B, you go and select.
Nice.
One of
So
those
it
people is
had
in
that transparency.
Who's the other person in the story who's in the room?
One of the people who was on that external group is in this room.
Do they know it?
No,
I saw no movement, I was just checking. Okay. All right, so here you've got consultant who's willing to waive some of the dollars because actually there's potential to use this exciting process in a way that's accessible for smaller projects and smaller people. And you've been clever, you've kind of started to get people inside the council actually making this happen, and so that will have built confidence, and you wanted to maintain the integrity of the process, so you've used some of your network of colleagues and friends and other councils to say, help us do this right. Right?
Yep.
And that will have started to move some of the kind of conversation in the back.
That's
Okay, who had the next big step?
I'm thinking both of us.
Okay, all right, think of it like a wedding, 1, 2, yep, that'll do. Right, fabulous. Now this is your fourth and your second, but we're going with 5, so there you go.
Okay, so the next big step was obviously working with Chad.
Yep.
And getting the jury in.
Right.
And to start the process, that deliberative process.
Right.
I'm going to hand over to you.
Yeah,
because
okay.
I think there's
Is this
some
more
good-
about Chad
Yeah,
at
it's
this
more
point?
about Chad,
Nice. So what'd you do? You got these people?
These people in. Thanks, Bill and co. They came in, and one of the things they were saying is what we heard the speaker this morning say, I don't believe it.
Yeah.
I don't believe council. So this issue of trust was there right from the start. They're like, what are they committing to? We had mayors and we had,
You had the
councillors.
CEO.
Of the place.
Thank you.
Oh, no, not anymore. Yep.
We had the CEO.
Okay.
Oh, do you need
We need the microphone for the video. It's all good.
No,
It's all good.
That was for last night.
Yeah, okay.
So-
So you got your people. What's
We've got the people, there's nervousness, there's mayors, there's councillors who are trying to give jurors reassurance.
was that thing where everybody just stands around the outside watching you do it in case you get it wrong?
No, the
Okay.
councillors, the ward councillor in particular, was very forthright in saying, we're here for you, we're behind this process, and she was personally going to champion it going into council. To me, one of the things that didn't happen back there, and that's why we didn't talk about it back there wasn't a council resolution around what they would do with the jury's recommendations.
Okay.
For me, that brought a
Oh,
real...
did you hear that?
Yes.
I like that. It brought a great degree of nervousness for me,
Yeah.
because I wanted to get involved in this kind of work because it was deliberative and it would have influence. So it had been discussed around the council table, it had been a briefing, but it didn't have a formal resolution saying... So at Darabin, when we did a participatory budgeting jury
So
there...
it's just sticking here. So, yeah, because what made the difference there was actually a council leader standing up and saying, actually, I will take leadership accountability and make sure this gets to the table. Okay? What happened else? What else did you do?
Well, the first thing they had to do was to decide how they wanted to make decisions.
Yep.
And they thought this was quite odd.
Okay.
And part of that was, often when you do a jury, the commissioning body will say, we want consensus, we want a supermajority or majority plus one, whatever how they're going to come to a decision. But the advisory committee here said no, that the jury can decide that. So the first thing they had to do, and they came up with a supermajority, they were asking questions around what other different types of juries and deliberative processes is used, and they came up with this 80% as a supermajority.
Nice. Okay. So while this was happening, what was happening for you?
Well, I was feeling equally as nervous
Yeah.
because, not just because there was no formal council resolution about what would happen with the decision, but because it's the first time, had the CEO there on the first day, and people were watching, definitely, but then the positive was that on that first day, the people who had been invited to speak as expert presenters, including the CEO, stayed until about 2 o'clock, and they interacted with the jurors as whenever they came out for a break, and so I was watching that unfold, and I was starting to feel more confident and more positive about it.
So we're moving into action. What's the next big step? What happened after this? You had a great first day.
We did all that kind of norming and getting together all happened. So coming
Fabulous.
back for the second day.
Is this the
Do you
next
want me
step?
to talk about between the first and the second
Oh
day?
yeah, so while we're like this,
We do we like that.
You remember, we're nearly near the end. I've got an excited crowd wanting the end
Oh,
to go.
well, okay. So we had 3 days where the jurors met, every second Saturday for 3 Saturdays. So in between time, I was furiously, gathering information from key players across the organisation so that I could get it back to the jurors so that they could make decisions or at least read it during the 2-week break. Some of the jurors actually went out to the sites and they checked them all themselves. So some people actually walked a whole loop around Yarra Glen, and they'd never done that before, and yet they were born in Yarra Glen. So people started to get very attached and wedded to they were taking this seriously, and it was brilliant to see. And then also in that time, I had the ward councillor who was, whilst very supportive, was being harassed by the community leaders who were fearful because they were relinquishing their power to people that they didn't know. And that caused a lot of angst, I guess, within the organisation. So I became that person to sort of navigate that and make sure that we didn't have any adverse effects coming into an election year as well.
So you could have got stuck at this point, couldn't you?
Very easily, and I could have probably gone home on stress leave.
So what did you do not to get stuck? So I'm going to get you to make that 3rd step. And what is the 3rd step? And what did you do to get to the 3rd step? Because it's easy to get stuck. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Yep, go. What's the step?
That step, when I think about the community leaders and those who were saying, why aren't we part of this? They were feeling excluded. They came along, they were invited as observers, they were in the room, they had access to all the same information, but we flipped part of our process around, which was quite fun. It was kind of a in-the-moment thing.
Nice.
We were doing some speed dialogue, so we had the witnesses presenting to the jurors that the jury had called for, and then one of the witnesses had to leave. So we had a group of jurors who had no one to talk to, and sometimes that can be nice because they can distill their thoughts. But we still had these observers in the room who'd been doing some of their door knocking, phone calling outside, so that deliberative process. So I invited them to come in, but not to be the witness, for the jury to be the witness, and for them to question the jury about the process. Is it transparent? Is this all the information you're getting? Do you believe that they're actually going to do this? What are you talking about? And by the way, here's my idea.
So is this when the crowd should go, ooh? Yeah, I think a little woo might be required. Yeah.
And that was a point for that group where they not only been part of the process, been invited in, had the information, but they then got to go directly with the jurors, and this sort of secret society notion sort of went away and was dispelled and didn't come into the room for the 3rd day or when the recommendations went to council.
So you've got a process that's actually move into completion. Yep. So if I get you to do one more step, and what was the next, almost the last step? Go.
On a halfway step. Okay.
You step back every time you go forward. Off you go. Yeah,
Okay.
Step into it, you're there.
So the jury, they did end up making a decision. Chad will talk a fraction about that in a minute. And they presented to council forum, and the councillors loved their ideas, and then they came back to a council meeting and council did endorse their project, or 2 projects. One of them has a bit of a caveat on it, however we're working our way around it, so that's all good. The rest of the organisation who will now, or they are already taking carriage of one of the projects, which is a massive project. It will take about 2 or 3 years for us to get it done. And so we're just busy communicating with the community and going out and doing some more engagement around that project. And that's all sort of started. I've been away for 8 weeks, so I know that that's been bubbling along while I've been away. Chad, though, you might want to talk about that last day briefly.
So we did have tears from one of the councillors, and they were overjoyed when the recommendations came out, and that was at 3:30. And at 3 o'clock we had furious agreement on an idea. At 3:15 we had nothing on the table. It all disappeared. There was an idea that came out on day 1 gained traction on day 2, really shaped up in their recommendations, and a lot of time on day 3. Very early on day 3, a new idea emerged. And some of the group didn't want it, some of the group did. So we had to run a series of processes around fleshing out, have we got all the ideas? Yes, no, right, great, they're all here. Which ones do we want to take forward and which are we going to leave behind? Because we've got a limited budget, what are you wanting to take forward? 80% consensus, we've got all the ideas. 80% consensus, these are the ones we're taking forward to explore. We explored them. 80%, these are the 2 that we've come down to. And then a group of people started saying, most people here don't want that. Most of the people in this room don't support this notion. So we had to re-step through the processes from that morning and how we had stuck to our guidelines of this supermajority of 80% to make a decision. And people in the jury were trying to challenge it because some of them were quite opposed to this idea. But when we took them through those steps, so it was really important for us to track what we were doing, and when we're generating, the outputs from each of the different sessions we had, I was able to walk around the room and say, in the morning, this is where we started. We generated the new ideas. There's the ones we left alone. Here's the ones we've taken forward. Here's the 80+% at the bottom of each of those things of how we've come to what we have. There was acceptance that is what was happened, but there was a bit of a reluctance to commit to one of the 2 sort of major recommendations.
And so was there anything that got them to come to a commitment? What was the trek through the history? What was the final turning point?
I think it was that acknowledgement of each of the steps that had gone through, so they could see at each, and it was a small jury, it was 12, so they could each locate, where they were when those decisions were made, and that they were part of them, and they all stood behind them. So it was, at 3:15 when people were sort of saying, no, we don't have consensus on this, and then we worked through that, and they've been spending half a day writing up this other recommendation that got challenged. So re-stepping through the process and being really firm on what those decision points were and capturing them, that was what got them back to consensus.
Fantastic. Great story. I'm going to get you to take one more step and then turn back and look at the rest of the journey you've just taken us through. And, you've got a room full of practitioners, people who kind of would like to. If you were to give them one piece of advice as clients in the room, what would be your one piece of advice based on this experience? Just one. Go. Might be little.
I think you've just got to give it a go. To be honest, just give it a go. And can I add to that?
Yeah.
And be prepared to make mistakes. And be prepared to learn as you go. So if you're happy to go into work every day and know that it's going to be a really serious learning environment where normally you feel confident that you might know a lot of things, and that shifts, you need to feel confident in that space. And don't be afraid to ask for help.
Nice.
And
Chad,
laugh a lot.
Yeah, laugh a lot. And Chad, you've got practitioners in the room. What's your one piece of advice based on this experience?
It's going to sound cheap, but that's not very helpful. It might be, actually. I'm going to go with what the heck. So sort of to reiterate Kym's thing. So deliberative processes have methodologies, but they're not recipes with step by step. There's lots of decisions, they're political, you need to make them. The project manager often has a real step up within their organisation around the spotlight that's put on them and the influence that they have around the process, their interactions with elected members and executives. But I just really want to get across, it is doable, it is possible, and it doesn't need to be a whole municipality, it doesn't need to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'm not taking away from those, I'm just saying I've seen people exclude deliberative options and juries as options because there's assumptions around price and scale that needs to happen. So I want to say there's affordable, smaller scales. It is possible, and this was something that was really fit for purpose. This was about the community making a decision. And And to me, that's why the jury worked.
Lovely. I think a round of applause to our two these guys have got about another 7 or 8 minutes. That's an opportunity for you to have the burning questions answered. Why don't you take 2 or 3 minutes with people you're sitting close to find out what burning question or reflection you've got, and then these two experts and brave venturers will have an answer for you. I've got a bid for 1, I've got a bid for 2, I've got a bid for 3, a bid for 4. Right, so short question, long answer.
So in a small-scale deliberative process, power sharing, how was power shared with the broader community that didn't get elected as one of the 12 participants? How did they do that?
I think we need this.
Okay, so to try and keep this short, there'd been a lot of engagement happening in Yarra Glen about streetscape works and all that sort of thing about 5 years earlier. So we had a whole bunch of data. What we did to confirm that data and to get more information, we went out and conducted additional community engagement with the broader Yarra Glen community. And we did that whilst the letters of invitation were in the post. So it gave us an opportunity to start talking about, well, keep an eye out in the post. You might actually get an invitation to express an interest to participate as a juror. And so we ended up with about another 200, 250 people participating in those engagement sessions. We just did pop-ups, you know, at the shopping precinct in Yarra Glen, which anyone who's been there, you know, it's not very big. So the IGA was very helpful, and we're allowed to do that. So that was good.
Is IGA like the supermarket?
Yes.
Okay, just ask.
Oh, yeah. And sorry,
To accompany that, we also did an online survey for 4 weeks with the same information.
We've got 3 other questions, so
A very quick thing as I pass this to you. Everything that was made available to the jury was made available to the wider community. So the jury would request information, was given to them, was put on the internet, and we'd let people know that.
nice. There's a lot. Here you go. Hello.
So my question's kind of a lead on from that. You talked about how community leaders who were already established were very uncomfortable with the process. What about the general community? Was there support for the process? Was there kind of political goings on with the community leaders? Were they trying to influence others in the community to turn against this process? Like, how did that dynamic play out?
And my question was just level of acceptance. Question number 3 was level of acceptance in the community afterwards.
So that's sort of
Same.
Is that all right? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, okay, so community leaders, a few of them were very adept at rallying their troops to become more vociferous against the process. And we did find out, I found out at the end of day 1, that one of the jury members was actually a close friend of one of these community leaders. And she was saying things to me that just made me start thinking, does she know this guy? Or surely she must. Anyway, I did some research. Yes, they're good friends. So yeah, yes. Community leaders were not happy, and yes. They did try and garner further support to undermine the process, and also harassed the ward councillor significantly. Really harassed her, which really surprised me. I was scratching my head a lot. I'm surprised I don't have a big hole in my head, actually.
And they harass the jurors as well.
In the jury, yes. So some of those community members were presented to the jury, and what I was observing was the more passionate people were about what they wanted to get across, the less receptive the jury were to that message, because it was a single message that was repeated, and this the questioning and the deliberation the juries got to, they were able to see beneath this rampant push that they felt coming from some. The juror who had the association with that person began to self-moderate between day 1 and day 2 around bringing that voice in, seeing how it wasn't well received within the jury, and moved from a position of I'm here for them to I'm one of the randomly selected group and we're working on this together.
Just quickly to add to that about the broader community, I did start getting phone calls from people who were saying that they didn't think it was a good idea, and why didn't we just put it into the hands of the known and trusted community leaders. And half an hour later, when I'd explained the whole process, oh, okay, I didn't know that. So I probably spoke to 20 to 25 people individually over the course of the 3 sittings, and then I had a couple of people actually call up about other things in Yarra Glen, but then realised I was the person who was heading up the People's Panel, and then were congratulatory. And they said, well, I know someone who's on the panel, and that person, is a really good person, and they think broadly about the community, not just their own needs. And yeah, so it was interesting.
I've just got a couple of other questions, so I'm just going to check. So I've got one at the back. Could you just shout out just for speed purposes?
Yeah, so you spoke about the nervousness about not having buy-in by the council about the outcome and following through on the outcome. Did you have a plan B, or what would you have done if they didn't?
So the question is, did you have a plan B? And your 2 questions quickly were?
Mine was just to see how this would now go into the future and continue this.
Would you do this again? And
does council have a greater awareness of the impact of them listening to the loud voices, the community leaders?
right, so easy. So just quick questions to, did you have a plan B?
No.
Did it change? Right, thanks. No, I did fear that was the answer. The second is, has this changed the council's positioning with those familiar leadership voices in the
And future projects.
and how might this impact on your use of this in
precedent
future projects?
expectations.
So I'll do yours first. Now all of the 9 councillors want these to happen. And so I've said, well, Teddy, you need to be strategic, they need to be fit for purpose, they don't fit every type of engagement. So there'll be a lot of work when I get back tomorrow. I'm sure that those conversations are still going to be happening. But that's great though, because councillors can see the value, which is really positive. And the rest of the organisation, they can also see the value, however they think more strategically. So a group of us are already looking at what are over the next 2 years, what are the big engagements that we'll be doing, and where would this kind of deliberative process fit, and, which is great. And your question was about a councillor's aware now.
Are they more aware of the impact of them giving such
I'm wondering if you might have answered some of that.
Yeah. It's interesting, being an election year, I think they were still a bit nervous, but they can see the value of it and they trust it. Whereas before, even though they said, yes, let's do it, they didn't trust it. So I think the trust has improved from the 9 councillors' perspective. And I think a sense of relief that the 12 jury members, our ward councillor did not know who they were. She'd never met them before because they don't go to anything that council runs, you know, come and have your say, they don't go. So from that perspective, she was really, really happy because, and that's what the other councillors, oh, that's actually great, we're getting other people to come and speak to us and inform our decision making.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join with me in thanking Chad and